meant was that everybody, but that phrase, everybody knows, stuck with. Today I was thinking about an interview that I had watched on YouTube. It was an interview on Russian TV that had occurred in the early 2000s, probably around 2004. And I thought it was very appropriate for what's happening today in our politics. In this interview, Boris Nemtsov, a famous physicist in Russia, good-looking guy, had actor's looks, and he was very, very popular in Russia. And it looked like he was going to become the next president of Russia, or at least the threat was there to Putin that he was going to become the next president. He was kind of like, I don't know if there's any kind of comparison, but he was kind of like a Bobby Kennedy. Ironically, he kind of died like Bobby Kennedy. His brains blown away near Red Square. But Boris Nemtsov said an important thing in that interview. He said, everybody knows. Now, what did he mean by that? What he meant was that everybody in Russia knew what Putin was doing. They knew that he was curbing press rights. I mean, he was essentially killing journalists. 70 journalists have been killed already. Everybody knew. Everybody knew that his constituents were behind him. Everybody knew that the elections were going to be phony. Everybody knew, one way or another, that Putin was basically staging a de facto coup. There was no way to fight it unless he were just going to go all out. And it looked like Nemtsov was going to make some type of headway. But like the rest of the journalists, he was murdered. Okay, right near Red Square, there's blood all over the place. And in fact, to this day, there are many people who still visit that site, place flowers there, and of course the police try to whisk them away. But I believe this was 2004 when she was murdered. But that phrase, everybody knows, stuck with me. It stuck with me. And, you know, I'm not here to change anybody's mind. Anybody who knows me damn well that I believe in determinism, that our past shapes what we are now. There's no, I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just trying to present some type of value. You either take it or you don't. So I'm not trying to convince anybody. That's the truth. But I see what goes on right now within the Republican Party. And we see an anti-science party, an anti-EPA party, just about anti-anything that's progressive. And plus we see lots of lies when we look at the Russia investigation. We already know what's happened with Flynn, Vice President Pence, Manafort, Nunes, just all of them. I mean, I thought about that phrase, everybody knows. And I think everybody really does know. I mean, even if and there are a lot of people who are on the other side, who like Trump. And they know that they're liars. And they're willing, I mean, they don't know that they themselves are liars, but they know that the Trump administration is basically filled with liars. In fact, the whole Republican Party. But they'll look at the other side, the Democrats, and rightfully so in some cases. There's liars and such. But it's the party's so replete with it. You wonder why people will go along with this, even though they know. Why do they do that? Well, number one, and this is just my thinking, it's very convenient to think that way. It's almost childlike. I don't want to have the cognitive dissonance to think about the lies and then have to worry about the other side and not just say, you know what, this is better, I'll go with it. I know he lies, and what the hell, I'll go with it. Okay. And there's some people who are just selfish, and there's some gain by allowing the bad guy to do what he does. Even if it means backing the guy who doesn't believe in evolution, backing the guy who doesn't believe in science. So I was thinking back to my past, when I was a young kid, and just with my family, my grandparents, and just the people whom I knew. And I thought about, for example, the real religiosity, the idea that there were these golden gates at the end of the tunnel. My grandmother once said that she had a near-death experience and she saw gold at the end, and it's kind of like pie in the sky type stuff. And a lot of people are like that, and I think everybody really does know certain truths. I mean, if you really think about it, just from that religious standpoint, in my mind, it's kind of logical. If you knew you were going to go to some theme park, this beautiful theme park, that's just a metaphor, that, for infinity, or even for 10,000 years, if I knew that, why would I take medicine? Why would I, wear the seatbelt? I just get there sooner. If that's the goal, aside from committing suicide, why not just let it happen? Geez, if I knew that I was going to have 2 minutes of pain and then all of a sudden I'm going to have glory for the rest of my whatever, why wouldn't I do it? And I look at people, and I think they all know. They all wear the seatbelts. They're not sure about their future. They know. They know. They can believe certain things, but there's a certain reality deep inside everybody that you just, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. So you kind of go against the facts and have faith that something good's going to happen. But there's a problem with all of that. When you go back to what I was saying about Boris Nemtsov and people willing to accept what's going on in the Russian investigation, willing to accept people who are defying all the science that global warming exists and could destroy us all, yet they still are willing to go along with it, even though they know that it's probably true. And that's a problem with me, because either that's like some type of psychosis, or it's just a fear of the reality. And it's rightly so. It's a difficult reality to deal with, but it's a difficult reality to realize that the politicians are liars, or the difficult reality that you have this idea of mortality, and that's it, and you have to accept it. You just have to accept it. So, how long do people go along with such things? And is it worth it? Because everybody does know. All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Good evening, everybody. It's May 1st. Isn't that great? I suppose. Dave can't make it tonight. I think he has some type of party to go to. I forget. He told me where he was going. I just can't remember, to be honest with you. He did send something. I'll check it out a little bit later and show you whatever he has. But Dave won't be joining us tonight, unfortunately, so we'll see him next week. So we hope he had a good time. Hope he has a good time, and we'll just keep on going. We're going to have, at least I plan on having George Lennon tonight, Sergeant George Lennon. He's been on quite a few times with us. Haven't heard back from him yet, but I have a feeling he'll be here, and if not, he'll contact me if there's any kind of issue. So we will go on nonetheless, yes. So thank you for showing up, everybody. Remember, we do have the Divided We Stand group page, which is a private page, but if you join and are willing to accept the conditions, we're glad you have you as a member. We're not looking for anything. This is basically a private channel. We don't have any type of monetization whatsoever, so you don't see any type of ads down here or whatever. I mean, it's just obnoxious. I don't even like watching channels that have ads if I can avoid it. I just something about it I really, really don't like. And I don't know if it's the fact that somebody wants to make money off something, which I can kind of understand if that's your thing and you do it in earnest and blah, blah, blah. But the whole thing with the ads thrown in front, I mean, it's kind of like going down a highway and all you see are billboards and you say, why? Why do you have to have this? It just seems so... I don't know. There's this how could you say this? Non-intuitive idea that somehow this thing's going to make this more interesting. It just doesn't make sense to me to have ads at all. I just can't stand them. They bug the shit out of me, and as long as you have a channel here, you're not going to see it. So that's a really good advantage for everybody, but obviously not applied to everybody. It's just the way it goes. So in any case, before I begin with some of the material that I'm going to talk about with George, I would like to show you a video of Tucker Carlson. And I'd like to do some commentary because this guy has a bug up his ass about the Democrats. And he's caused a lot of harm to anybody who's rational. You have to listen to this son of a gun, and you wonder why he's given a voice. And yeah, of course, we know that it's Fox News and this is what they do. But this guy is just incredible. And I have only seen a few seconds of this, but I know it was this week. And I thought, I'm going to challenge myself and make some commentary about this, because this guy is basically the perfect representative of what I don't like. So I'm going to switch scenes, and then I'm going to put an overlay in so I can kind of be there while we go over these things. So there's Tucker. Let me put in an overlay, and we'll put myself in green screen mode, transparent. All right. I don't want to be near this guy, quite frankly. All right. Sort of like that. All right. That'll have to be good enough. Maybe a little bit smaller. All right. So I do want to rail on this guy a little bit, because he's a major pain in the ass to the Democratic Party. He influences a lot of people I know who actually like him, and Yeah, I'm sure you know some people too. All right, so let's get to it.
Michael Tracy doesn't have a job in mainstream journalism. In a normal country, he would, because his attitude is the definition of what journalism is supposed to be. He's liberal in the truest sense. He's skeptical. He believes in free speech. He asks obvious questions.
All right, already I've got a problem with this guy. Okay. Michael Tracy, I think he was the guy on the Young Turks or something like that. You know, there are, like, as I told you folks, you know, one of the reasons why Dave and I created the page Divided We Stand is that we felt that, you know, we had to deal with the Republican Party, and they were fascists, and they are fascists in a certain sense. They're trying to just obliterate anything that's constitutional. And what we didn't want was to have an open forum with the channel, because we had so many people on the far left, what I would call almost like your cosmic assholes who just, you know, they just have to be heard, and they start sounding like Republicans because all they do is rail against Democrats. They very, very rarely go against Republicans, and when they do, it's, you know, they just touch them lightly. I mean, they really don't go after them. But I've always had a problem with the far left, because it always seems to remind me of the far right. And Michael Tracy is that type of guy, because he's the type of guy who will go on this guy's show, okay, and most likely cut up Democrats. Let's see what he has to say about it, though, okay? Give him a fair chance.
He notices obvious patterns, and more than anything, he challenges people who actually have power. He punches up, not down. And for that reason, he's on Substack. But we do pay very close attention to him. Had him on the show a couple of times. He's really smart.
All right, so already I'm picking up some bad vibes, because here he's complimenting somebody on the quote unquote left. Okay, so already you got to be suspicious, because he's talking about Michael Tracy. Okay, you know, and there are people who like Michael Tracy. There are people who like, you know, Dave and I had a show 2 months ago about, you know, I forget the show, I don't know, it was Chris's channel, it was the Dive, okay, and you know, these folks, you know, continually talk about Democrats, when the big problem, as Dave and I have said over and over and over again, is the right wing. They are the most lethal force against democracy that we've ever seen. You know, and you can't be a keyboard commando and, you know, constantly rail against, you know, somebody who's in the center when you got the bad boy on the right. You know, that's Michael Tracy. You know what I mean? He's just loud, so to speak. You know, he says loud things, not literally loud, but, you know, makes a name for himself. Okay, let's go on.
And he notices things the rest of the media don't want you to notice. This week, he noticed something pretty weird about the reaction to the jury verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial. It seemed like everybody in authority was reading almost like from the same script. This trial, they told us in unison, isn't really over.
The fact is, we still have work to do.
The family does not get to have their loved one back. There is still work to be done.
And while this is a step in the right direction, there's still a lot of work to be done.
But this is just one stop. There is more work to be done.
It's a feeling like, okay, this happened, now the work really begins.
So we can't leave this moment or look away thinking our work is done.
This moment is where the work begins.
We've got a lot of work to do, but this feels like a beginning rather than an ending.
We have a lot of work to do in this country because systemic racism has infected us all.
And we know that until we...
Yeah, well, already, so he's quoting these people who say that, you know, we're only at the beginning. Well, no shit. I mean, because it's always been this way. You know, we keep trying to take steps forward. You know, and this was a case where it was clearly one step forward. But how about all the other steps? So, you know, where is he going with this thing? We're going to find out. But it looks like he's just because we all say that it has to go forward, there's some type of, conspiracy for knowing that 2 + 2 = 4.
We stop the violence, then we have work to do.
There's a lot of work to be done to get to liberty and justice for all.
Everyone reading the bumper sticker. The best is the comedians reading state-approved propaganda. So many people have been so gravely diminished by the past few years. But there's more where that came from. Tracy then went and found a lot of other people reading from exactly the same script, and it's an incredibly long list. And if you want to understand the axis between politicians,
the incredibly long list, who fucking cares? So people are pointing out that we have a long way to go. I mean, that's kind of obvious. It's kind of like saying, the Philadelphia Eagles have a long way to go. And if everybody fucking says it, he thinks that there's some kind of conspiracy, something wrong with that. No, there's a long way to go. I don't get that. It's somehow because people say, civil rights has a long way to go, that somehow there's something where you don't have a long way to go. But you do, Tucker, you do. We have a long way to go, even longer than they say. Especially when you have people like you screwing things up for the rest of us. Stupid people like you who make this world dangerous. A brain like that makes countries go to war. A brain like that allows things like global warming to continue. A brain like that allows things like January 6th to occur. That is what the real problem is. I think we can all agree on that one.
in big business and fake state-approved comedians, just all of them, everyone with power, all acting as one in unison against you and your interests, basically telling you that...
Oh, now he's... Now, I have no problem with the unison, because that's a pretty good thing when you get some forward movement when everybody's together. But he's saying against you, so he's really talking about you, meaning, obviously, the Fox audience. So now, not only is he saying that it's somehow made up because everybody's saying the same line, now that everybody's saying that, he's saying that it's being pointed at the Fox viewer. Now he's basically saying they got the guns pointed at you. You got Best Buy, you got businesses, you got media, you got the people, you got the politicians. This is what this guy's doing. He's putting fear in the audience. And then what do people do when they have fear? Well, they get their adrenaline going and they act out of fear and do crazy shit. This guy's dangerous. That is a dangerous brain right there. Because people will buy this kind of shit. This weird kind of thinking. You know, just make it seem like it's right, you know. Just look at his face. You wouldn't even have to put the volume on.
Yeah, this guy was found guilty of murder, but you're the one who's guilty, and we're going to punish you. We're going to spend some time doing it.
Okay, so now you're going to make them feel, yeah, you know, you are getting picked on. Because he knows it already, these people, you know, and I'm going to get to that in a few minutes, have a different idea of what biases and prejudice and racism. Republicans have, in general, a completely different idea about who's being persecuted in this country. I mean, just look at the way people think about what happened in the election and all this crap that's going on in many states, which I'll get to. But let's finish up with this guy.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying. Then check this out. Best Buy, you thought it was an electronics store. No! Quote, Best Buy's unwavering commitment to this work is as strong as ever. Really, what work? I thought you sold stereo speakers. Shh, Best Buy, be quiet. The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, quite concerned too. We know that there is still much work to be done. Really? What kind of work are you be doing, Mr. Museum Guy?
Fucker. you know what a brand is, right? And a brand means a hell of a lot to a company. People have to trust a product or a service, right? Fucker. You have to trust the company. It's just why people didn't trust like GE and Bechtel and those type of corporations in the fossil fuel industries. They have good right to do that. Some companies do take a stand because more of those customers are not on your side. I mean, I read something where 79% of all the gross domestic product in the United States comes from people who are Democrats or to the left. And you're going to attack Best Buy, and you're going to attack any company that's going to take a stand? What's wrong with it? It's just not selling. You're selling not just a product, it's a brand. You know? Would you want to buy diamonds from a company in South Africa that was part of apartheid? Was that cool? Would it have been cool to, buy things from Krups during, the late 1930s and early 40s up till the end of the war from Germany? Would that have been cool? No, if they had taken a stand, maybe something would have been a little bit better during those days. No. What he's saying is he kind of is afraid of boycotts and things like that because he's going to lose. You might be able to cheat your way to an election here, which you have done. Did it in 2000. I don't know how many times Republicans have cheated one. I still don't know whether Beto O'Rourke lost his election. But it's this kind of shit. It's okay to look the other way when the Republicans do it, but when a company takes a stand, you don't like them? Fucker, don't buy from them. They don't need your money anyway.
Then the CEO of Target moved some words around. Quote, today's verdict does not mean that our work is done. There's much more to do. Really? Getting the sense you're going to be the subject/victim of this work? Yeah, you are. It went on, though. The CEO of Starbucks, Nationwide, and American Airlines all issued statements declaring that more work must be done. So did hockey teams and food delivery services. Even politicians who have never, even for one day, had a real job, people like Bernie Sanders, talk about the need to do more work. And by the way, it wasn't just Democrats. It was, let's say, Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina.
Yeah, Tim Scott, he's another winner too. We could spend a show talking about him. I don't know what happened to him, but anyway, let's hear what Tucker says.
Republican, the guy who's going to be giving the Republican response on Wednesday night to the president's speech to a joint session, somehow managed to mirror, Tim Scott did, the statement by Yale University's president, almost word for word. Quote, we know there is more work to be done, said Tim Scott. Yale's statement read this way. We know there's much more work to be done. Not more work, much more work. So the difference between Tim Scott and the president of Yale was just one of degrees. Tim Scott said more, the president of Yale said much more. That is kind of the difference between the two parties, isn't it? Just a matter of degrees.
Why doesn't he just get to the point? He doesn't think there is any work that needs to be done and that this is conspiracy against hard-working people like you, the Trump voter. Why doesn't he just get right to the point?
Here's the amazing thing, to restate. None of these people explain what all this work is.
George will be right there.
All it is that you've got a lot of work to do. We'll have details for you coming soon.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click.
Enough of Sean Hannity. All right, let's go back to the scene here. I believe we've got George with us. George, can you hear me? Okay, George, let me get you in here. George, good to see you.
Hey, what's up, Brian?
Great to see you. I started a little bit early. I did throw something on, not on Sean Hannity, on Tucker Carlson. So we're ready to go. And how are you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'm good.
No, it's great to see you again. I saw you yesterday, but it's always good to see you nonetheless. And today's kind of a special day in that we don't have Dave Price here today. I don't know if that's good or it's bad, you know. I'm actually talking today, but no, I'm just kidding. Dave's a great guy and all that kind of stuff. But he can't make it. He's got some kind of party. So the show goes on. So, George, again, welcome. And I have a lot of things I really want to ask you because, you know, you have a lot of insight into this stuff that I don't have and that I really need. I mentioned you at the school, I believe yesterday or a couple of days ago, pertaining to George Floyd, but it's really not even George Floyd that I really want to talk specifically about and ask you questions about. First of all, you can hear me clearly, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. My problem with not so much the trial, but you know, first of all, everybody thinks about George Floyd, but it really was the trial with Derek Chauvin. George Floyd was not the problem. He is not the problem. This is not a George Floyd, in my opinion, it's not a George Floyd thing. This is an America thing, and Chauvin represented, you know, that problem. And I had just shown some clips of Tucker Carlson, and he's, you know, baiting the Trump voters to think that they're being picked on. And it made me think over the last few days, George, that these people who are Republicans, they think they're like in a different universe in just about everything, whether it's about the election, about global warming, about the media, whatever it is, they're kind of on the other side. And I have some things I'm going to show you. But when I look at a trial that, at least in my mind, it was so clear cut. It was just so absolutely clear cut. And then you have people who the Republicans may even agree with the verdict, but they're already snapping back in this idea that somehow they're the ones being persecuted. And I still don't get that idea where they think they're persecuted, and for some reason, everybody else is not. And I'm trying to get your idea because you come from a military perspective where everything's supposed to be, and we'll probably have to get to that too, sort of what's happening right now in the military. But in a perspective where there's a perceived fairness in the military, that you can't be colorblind in the military, you can't have those types of ideas. So I guess I'm going to leave an open-ended question to you about this. Is it basically what's going on with the Republican voter who actually perceives they themselves as being persecuted? I mean, I don't even get it.
That's a unique dynamic. I just was literally talking to somebody about how, like, America is so, it's in my 50 plus years, it has changed so much, but it's stayed the same. You know, if we look at what the people like Tucker Carlson, well, the people like at Fox and News One, I guess, they're trying to protect their legacy. You know, and the problem is, in the past, in the 60s and the 50s, you could tell, yes, a white man could tell his son, this is our country. You inherited this country because our forefathers built this country. And the little boy would say, thank you, Dad, I appreciate it. I'm gonna cherish this land even more. Not knowing that in order for this land to become the land that it is, you had to create genocide on the indigenous people who are already here.
Right.
You can't discover something that's already being occupied. You're the immigrant.
Right.
You know, so, and what happens is, and then slavery came along, and then slavery went away, but it didn't. It just changed its name to Jim Crow, you know, and different laws and different rules. So we look at America from two different perspectives. The naivety of, and I don't even want to say white Americans. I want to say there's a section of Americans that, like, I know some African Americans. It's like, if it wasn't for slavery, we wouldn't be here. I'm so glad I'm here in this land of milk and honey. But they seem to forget that at the particular time that we were taking from Africa, Africa was the bastion of society. It was civilizations that were 100 years old before the Europeans set foot in these other lands. There were people, they were doing just fine before they came.
As it where life itself started, you know?
Yeah.
You know, as far as human beings. Yeah, human beings.
And so, and it's like an oxymoron to say white supremacy, because white supremacy really is the opposite of supremacy. The people who profess this are actually acknowledging that they have some inferiority complex. That if you, like, you never heard Michael Jordan tell people, "I'm the greatest."
Right, never.
To this day, he's never said, "I'm the greatest basketball player ever was." He said, "I played with some great guys. I had a great career." There's a level of humility there. So white supremacists constantly saying, "We're better than everybody else. We're better than everybody else." And anything that's an attribute to yourself, they try to degrade that attribute. And the unfortunate thing is, in this country, the George Floyd situation is not just a situation, it's an epidemic that goes not only for police brutality against minorities, as they say now, the majority minorities. If you know the history of policing, the police itself is created to curtail slavery. The whole industry, the Ku Klux Klan, the police, all of them, they were created to keep slaves in place. Slave patrols became police. The slave patrol became police. And it went from there. And that's where we're at right now. And people like Tucker Carlson, the only way they stay on TV is to create fear and hate. Fear that somebody's going to take something from you, and hate. And Brian, you remember in Charlottesville, what those khaki pants wearing radicals were saying, Jews will not replace us.
Right. You
know, they were telling.
And they said it right out front. They said it right there. Right. I mean, it was so bold. At least they were honest and just said it. You know, I mean, I'm not giving them any credit aside from the idea they said it, but it's just so obvious. And then for a president to say there were good people on both sides, and then try to demonize Antifa, you know, because you're against fascism. You know, very few times have I seen any type of violence from Antifa. You know?
I mean, my grandfather fought World War II against the people that said the same thing. He fought World War II against fascist Mussolini and the crazy Nazis who said the same thing. Jews will not replace us.
Right.
You know, so and in their mindset for Americans to repeat that Nazi slogan shows that there's so much fear that you'll really pick up something that you fought against 50 years ago, and now 75 years ago, and now you try to bring it back. I mean, the largest Ku Klux Klan rally in America happened in New York City in Madison Square Garden, along with a parade they had. You know, so they filled Madison Square Garden up in 1939, and that was their whole platform. We can't let them take away what we have built. You know, it's like you stole something, and the people you stole it from don't even want it back. They just want to be. Can you share what you
right? Can you share it?
You know, okay, you're here. We're here. Let's just do what we gotta do. I don't know, man. It's sometimes, I feel safer for my son who lives in Europe with his wife than if he lived here in America.
Right. I'm going to show you something, George. I'm assuming you're going to be able to see this. Let me. I'm trying to get a smaller me there. This is a graph. Now you'll have to tell me whether you can see this or not.
I can see it.
Okay. But and this is just one particular poll or survey. I mean, I have a couple of these, but they generally say the same thing as the other. So it's about perceptions of bias, and we were just discussing this, but at least there's some quantification of what we're talking about. And we have all the different groups. We have Muslims, immigrants, blacks, gays and lesbians, trans people, Christians, and whites. And of course, in the graphic here, you have the Republicans with the red bullets, and then the Democrats with the blue bullets. And for example, with Muslims, probably something like 40% of Republicans think that Muslims, have received some type of bias, where Democrats would say it probably well over 80%. Immigrants, the same thing. And now this is the specific one that bothers me the most, because I mean, all of these groups, the Republicans tend to think there's less bias, but within the African American community, this number says roughly 25%, only 25% of Republicans. So you're talking 25% of 73 million. You're only talking about 20 million people at the most actually think that there's bias. And to me, that's just absolutely shocking. I mean, it's just, I mean, all you'd have to do is look what happened with the voting lines and what's going on now in a lot of these different states. And I'll show you these things later. But it's nothing you don't know yourself, George. But how can you not see that?
You heard Tim Scott. You heard Tim Scott said, big as day, America is not racist. There's no bias. Once I became successful, it became no longer a valid point. And that's basically what he said. He used himself for example. Once I became the only black Republican senator in America.
Well, George, I'm not actually surprised with Tim Scott, because I know there are people within any type of group. There are always these people who are anomalies. I've seen it happen. I know that there are self-hating Jews. I had a friend, he's long gone, but for some reason, he just hated the fact that he was Jewish, and he would walk down the streets of Philadelphia with me, and one time he heard someone who was Jewish talking about a trip to Israel, and he said, "You see, God damn it," he said, "and that's why I can't stand my own people, because they have to talk about their trip to Israel." And I thought, how simple are you thinking? And this is a smart guy. He's very, very intelligent, and he just was very, very self-hating. And I can't put my finger on exactly why somebody's self-hating or why they decide to take the opposite viewpoint. I guess what you're alluding to with Tim Scott is that he's become successful kind of playing that type of role. And obviously it really doesn't matter what minority you are. There are going to be those people. I mean, there were security guards that worked for the Nazis. I mean, and they were probably trying to save their own asses, but they would beat their own people because they were going to be able to get a potato instead of, moldy bread or nothing at all. So I'm not terribly surprised. Collaborators, right? That's a much better choice of word. Thank you.
That would be the best word to describe people like Tim Scott. They're collaborators. There's no way that nobody in America for the last 4.5 years could have heard the rhetoric that Donald Trump spewed across the country, and to even see their rallies, how that just the hate. I mean, from him coming down the escalator was a hate speech,
right?
So for you to say there's no racism, the political party, we need the party of Lincoln to become the party of Lincoln again. If we just had people that could see wrong and identify it, I just think the Republicans are a bunch of cowards.
Right, but that it is. But I mean, I don't know your opinion, and I want your opinion, George, on this. Is that I am, as much as I'm happy that Trump's out of here per se. I see all these things that are happening as far as voter suppression, gerrymandering. I think they're going to get away with it. I mean, I think because they've had enough judges that have been placed there. We got a person like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema that it's such an uphill battle, and they're essentially a criminal organization, and I'm afraid that it'll eventually get its way into the military if it hasn't already. We've seen people released from January 6th, and I'm still upset about that. How confident are you that we're going to be able to, stay together and we're going to be able to defeat? Because they're the minority in a way. The Republicans are the minority, but they want minority rule, essentially, correct? I mean, that's what they want.
And that's what they've been having.
Right, and
it's been in the military. I served 20 years. I did 20 years, and back in the 80s, I was stationed with a guy who was a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan. I didn't know they had a card. I didn't know he had a card membership. I vividly remember seeing a card. He pulled it out of his wallet and showed it to me, and I was like, wow. Now, when it was time for him to re-enlist, the Air Force denied him re-enlistment because of his affiliation with the Ku Klux Klan and some disparaging things he had to say or believe. And it just caught me off. There was people in the military that we would say, "Oh man, that's a racist white boy."
Right?
They would say stuff. I distinctly remember the first time I deployed to Saudi Arabia, and we were sitting around, getting a briefing, and one of our captains was like, now we got to deal with these sand niggers. And I was like, did he just say sand niggers?
Right.
And he kept on, and didn't blink.
And thinking that it would be acceptable to you,
Yeah. And I was like, yo, he just said that on the microphone.
Right.
Yo, now we're gonna handle these sand niggers, and we're gonna push them back into the dark ages. That mentality of that leadership we had. They didn't see the Iraqis as humans. They seen them as sand niggers versus jungle niggers, I guess. But that was his verbiage, and eventually, he made it to be a colonel, a full bird colonel.
Wow.
So you think about there's a full bird colonel who's in my chain of command. In order for me to get promoted, he would have to look at me and evaluate me and not show any bias. But the minute we deployed to a foreign country, he not only referenced them as nigger, he gave a distinction as if there were different types of nigger.
Right.
Now we got to deal with these sand niggers, and we're gonna put them. We're gonna blast them back to the Stone Age. So I'm like, did anybody else hear that? And a couple people and some people cheered. Yeah, I was like, so the rest of us woke individuals, pocketed our hands, like, yo, y'all can't cheer to that,
Right. That's nothing.
We're not here to do things like this. You got to think about. So Brian, as long as society, as long as civilization has, as long as one civilization has coveted the beginnings and the belongings of another civilization, we've had some type of apartheid. You know, South Africa actually had a government that was built on apartheid. Like its constitution said that there was a difference between the Afrikaans and the Europeans.
Right.
The Europeans didn't say we're Africans that just happened to come from Europe. They still were claiming European dominance. And what we have in America, we had apartheid in America.
Certainly did.
You know, Jim Crow is apartheid.
Right.
Whenever you make a law up that says based on a person's skin tone, based on a person's economic or social endeavors, it limits their opportunities. That's some type of oppression. Apartheid, as Bishop Tutu would say, it's not apartheid, it's apartheid because it's related to hate. It's based on hate. You hate what someone has, or you hate that they, you know, and it's crazy. It's crazy that everybody wants to give stuff to the Europeans. When the Europeans came to Africa, there's a race of people, it was a nation on the western coast of Africa called Huron that no longer exists. The Germans exterminated. The Germans were the last one to colonize Africa, and it was a race of people called the Hurons, and the Germans exterminated. The British took Liberia and Nigeria, they colonized them, even after the king was like, what do you want? We can trade with you. No, they didn't want to trade with them, they wanted it. You know, and you know, we also talk about as long as our civilization has had some type of gluttony required. I mean, we go back to when the Crusades. The Crusades had nothing to do with Islam or Christianity. The Crusades only dealt with trade routes that the Muslims controlled. So the Pope at the time allowed the Europeans, nations who wanted Italians, Germans, and the British, they wanted those trade routes. So they said, you take Jerusalem back and you'll break the backs of the Muslims and you'll have the trade routes. And it went through the Mediterranean Sea and that's all they wanted. Same
Right.
reason why the Ottoman Empire was destroyed. You know, so whenever it's unfortunate that the racism we have in America in your lifetime, in my lifetime, I don't think we'll see it go away.
Right. And it's funny you brought this story up to a lesser degree with my father during World War II, George, when he was on the ship. You know, he had a lot of guys from, you know, he's from Philly, he's Jewish, and he's with a lot of guys from Arkansas, and so you can know what he went through. But I remember my father saying, he said, you know, I met a lot of good people, but there's some things I'm never going to forget because I spent 4.5 years fighting for he enlisted too. He didn't just, you know, he enlisted, and he had to end up fighting on the ship, and that's, you know, a really rough thing to have to do. And he said, here I'm fighting for my country, and, you know, I'm just trying to get my bunk, you know what I mean, to get some sleep. And this is the kind of thing that really upsets me, because, you know, what you were mentioning in Saudi Arabia and Iraq, these kind of things, these kind of comments, and then the person next to you is the person probably going to save your life. And there's this lack of sensitivity, lack of understanding, because part of this too, George, my opinion is, my perspective is that, number one, part of it is a lack of intelligence. Like, as you said, that the very people who seem to think they're superior, there's some inferiority complex, so that already means they probably have some psychological problem. And then on top of that, what really worries me, and where I'm going with this, George, is that can this happen on a mass scale? You know, can 30 million people watch Tucker Carlson one night, and then, you know, the next day they're ready to jump over the cliff? You know, I mean, that's almost where I'm at right now.
It happened January 6th.
Right.
It happened January 6th. And literally, I'll say the majority of the people that went to listen to the president talk, listen to President Trump talk on January 6th, they wanted to stop the steal. They actually believed that the election was stolen.
And they had a lot of backpacks with them too, by the way.
But they weren't the ones who there was some people who came there already had in their mind what they were going to do.
Right, the backpacks. I mean, that they had things in those backpacks.
But the sheep followed them.
Right.
When President Trump said we're gonna go to the Capitol, I'm gonna meet you there, they turned around and started walking to the Capitol. And a lot of those people got caught up in the hoopla. But like I said, I would say 10% of those people that went to the Capitol with the plan to not even to stop it, to do some assassination.
Right.
To
of their own too, like with pens.
They were going to do what they were trying to do in Michigan.
Right.
Was it Michigan or Minnesota?
No, well, in Michigan, absolutely, with Gretchen Whitmer. So
they were going to try to do the same thing there, but on a larger scale. And, bruh, I'm telling you, man,
well, this is why I'm worried, because, again, I think what it is, they kind of know the way the demographics are going in this country, and it shouldn't matter. It really should not matter. What really matters is, what does a person contribute to society, and are they a decent person or not? And they're worried about demographics of all types of things to worry about. This country is, I don't want to say build upon it, but we prospered from having different cultures. I mean, I can prosper just by going to an Italian restaurant or a Greek restaurant, or I'll eat any kind of food.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our diversity has made us stronger. So when you think about it, when I watched this movie one time, and I know you've seen it before. It's called Gangs of New York.
Yes, indeed. Yes, absolutely. Yes, indeed.
I watched this movie, and Daniel Day-Lewis' character kept saying the native-born sons. And Leo DiCaprio was like, you're not native. Yeah, we were born here. So since we were born here, we're different. So the Italians and the Irish and the Polish were all treated as opposites. As a kid, I don't know how, I mean, in the 70s when I was growing up, I had a couple friends that one was Italian and one was Polish. And we were hanging out one day, and I made a mistake and called one of them a white boy. I said, well, at least I got two white boys as friends. And they were both like, we're not white. I was like, what do you mean you're not white? He was like, I'm Polish. I'm not white. I'm a Polish American. But my family came from Poland. And the other guy said, I'm Italian. My family came from Italy. I just happen to live in New Jersey, but I'm Italian. So that was like 40 years ago. But now those same Irish, Polish, and Italian young men, their grandchildren, their children now are saying, I'm a white guy. So you give up your identity in order so you won't be oppressed. So that's what basically happened. A lot of Europeans who came to America as immigrants wanted to assimilate. So they gave up their identity in public. So right now, Brian, you can walk down the street and you can be just got off the boat, per se, can't speak a lick of English, and walk down the street and nobody would think second or third about where you're from.
Right.
But I could walk down the street.
It's different.
And I'm already identified as I'm not from here because I can't hide that.
And they're going to make assumptions too, and that's the worst part of the thing, is that they will make assumptions about you, and they're going to, they'll. I mean, I know that it's going to be horrible, and it's humiliating to get stupid.
Well, I mean, those guys I was stationed in the military, in the Air Force, and the Air Force is a very snobbish branch. It's difficult to get into the Air Force.
Right.
It's not easy. So people who are in the Air Force, I'm stationed with. And they literally, one of the guys I worked with, his last name was Rebecca. And Rebecca told me I was a Cosby black. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you could be one of Cosby's sons. I was like, why you say that? I said, because, you're a cool black guy. So basically, a lot of people split black people into two different categories. The people who have assimilated into the society, who speak and act and talk a certain way, and aspire to the American dream. And then you have those other black people who haven't accepted their roles, So I was kind of offended a little bit. I was like, bruh, I'm from New Jersey. I grew up on food stamps. My mother had me. He's like, you lived in the projects? I was like, all my life before I got here. And so he really thought, well, matter of fact, he didn't really think it. My whole shop looked at me different. They didn't consider me to be a threat. They considered me to be like Tim Scott, because I was in the military. There's no way that you think you can't be a Democrat, George. You can't think about you. There's no way you could support Clinton. You're in the military, So they brainwash the military people to think that the Democrats are against them. They're trying to take away their benefits, trying to take away their country and stuff like that. And it all goes back to Lyndon Johnson, because he was against the military wouldn't let the military do what they supposed to do. He held on to their coattails and didn't let them do what they're supposed to do. And that funneled down through government, through the military. So those junior officers and those junior airmen and soldiers that were in the military in the 60s under Lyndon Johnson felt as though the Democrats were against us. And that's where it comes from. But I'm telling you, bro, it's so weird to have guys talk to me and tell me that I'm not like, for real, you're lying. I was like, dude, I'm serious. It was like, but you got education. You weren't a thug or anything, were you? I was like, not all black people are thugs, bro. It's the perception. And I don't think in my lifetime that the perception is going to be able to be altered enough.
Right. I think it also depends where you live, your parents. There's so many forces working against us. And I always even when I was a kid, I thought, well, why can't we just be a diverse country? I mean, even genetically, it's good when people mix race. All that kind of stuff is really actually good for you. It's good for society. And I'm just surprised that these things link the power of what's around us that stays in us.
So one of the things you said was the Republicans, or not even Republicans. Let's just look at our 50 states. They don't want a 51st state because that would give a new state that's 70% not white.
Right.
70% not white. So that means if it's 70% not white, that means it's 70% Republican. I mean, anti-Republican.
Right.
Because it's not white. So Montana, both of the Dakotas.
Right.
Vermont, New Hampshire.
Even Utah, it's not, and Wyoming are not,
I visited Utah before, and me and my wife spent the week in Utah, and it was so little amount of black people that I was counting them. I got up to 25 black people I saw, and that was a Utah basketball game.
With the Utah Jazz? Yeah.
I went to see the Utah Jazz play, and it was 25 black people. I was literally in the stands going, I see one over there. I see one over there.
Actually, it's not even that funny if you think about it. It's actually kind of depressing.
Before that, my wife was like every day we were out we were in Park City, and I was like, oh, there's one over there. She's like, stop counting. And then by the time we got to go to the Capitol to go see the game, she had started going. She's like, hey, there's a black lady. Hey, there's one over there. Like, we were like, this is Utah. So the people in Utah, the Dakotas, they're voting they have no choice but to not understand us because they're not diverse there.
Right. And they have a lot of power too, because they each have 2 senators. It's ridiculous.
That's a lot of power that has no understanding. And you said before, it's ignorance. I mean, I'm in basic training, and a dude from Butte, Montana, asked to touch my hair. After my hair starts going, I'm like, what do you mean touch my hair? And get away from me. He was like, no. And one of the other black guys was with us. He was like 10 years older than us. He was a grown man. He said, "Yo, Lennon, let him touch your hair real quick." And I was like, "Go ahead." So he touched my hair, and he jogged back over to the other white guys who was shining their shoes, and they all. Next thing I know, they all back over. Was like, "Yo, Lennon, can we touch your hair?" I was like, "Yeah." And I had really wavy hair, you know. And he was like, "Why is your hair different than his hair? And why is your hair different than his hair?" I said, "Not all black people are the same, just like not all white people are blonde or brunettes. You know, you got redheads. We're different. You know,
Right.
God made us like that." And by the time basic training was over, I had those white guys wearing do-rags, trying to get waves, you know, trying to rap, you know, but they had never, and I couldn't believe it. I was 18 years old. It was 1986. I never would have imagined that I would have met somebody who had never spoke to a black person.
Hmm.
I was blown away. And I wrote about it to my parents. You know, yo, it's white dudes here who have never talked to a black person before. So you imagine somebody who's never spoke to somebody other than themselves have to make decisions about those people they never met.
Right.
It's like a man making decisions for a woman's body when he can never, like I can never have, I can only say to my wife or my daughter, is there anything I could do to make you feel better? But I can't relate to anything they may go through as women. You know, if they have their monthly cycle, I don't know. I don't know what that feels like. I can't relate to that. So how can I make a decision on something I have no idea about? And that's the problem about when we have states like Montana and the two Dakotas. It was really one Dakota, but they decided to split it up so they could have double the power.
Right.
You know, they're such a, you know, the Northeast, we got more people in New Jersey than both the Dakotas and Montana and Utah combined. But the four of those states got just as much power as New Jersey. And if you combine those four states, that's 8 votes against our 2 votes.
Right.
So that ain't fair. But
No.
the problem that we're stuck with, Brian, is that those places, that part of our country don't even want to be diverse.
Right.
They don't even want to bring us in.
And we certainly don't want to move there, you know.
Don't
You
get me
know.
wrong.
Right.
Park City, Utah is beautiful.
Oh, the mountains and everything like that, I'm sure.
It's Denver, Colorado, beautiful. But you land there at the airport and you walk around one day there, you're counting your hands. You're like, oh, I guess he's Mexican or Puerto Rican. I don't know. You know, like literally, how can people in Utah be worried about immigrants taking jobs from them when there's no immigrants there?
Right. There's no job to take.
There's no field. There's nobody doing agriculture there. Like it boggles my mind. And then all those places out in the Sun Belt where they're growing grain and soybean, those are farms that are owned by families. There's no immigrants coming across the border to take those jobs. But that's all the industry they have there.
Right.
Iowa, it's farmland.
Right.
There's no technical, logical industry growing, you know.
Right.
Last time I checked, Silicon Valley was in California.
Right.
Or Seattle. You know, so I don't understand the fear. I wrote down the fear and hate together trumps love. Love can take out hate by itself, hands down. Love and hate on the same level, love's always gonna win.
Mm-hmm.
Love can overcome fear all by itself. Mm-hmm. But if you got fear and hate coming at love from two different sides, love starts to back away into a corner.
Right.
So we're in a situation right now where it's one part of the country is fearful of us, is fearful of anybody, and another part, I look at Trump rallies and I saw fear in one side of the rally and hate speech on the other side. So that Tucker Carlson, he'll talk about it's fear. You should be afraid they're coming across the border. And then right after that, Hannity comes on and says, you should be upset. You should be upset what's going on. Why are they allowed to do these things? So Fox is pushing fear and hate at the same time, back to back.
Right.
I watched one day. I watched Fox. One day.
That's a good thing to watch it every once. I think it is a good thing because this is where they're getting their support. So we have to kind of figure that out.
They got this British dude who comes on at night, and he's worse than all of them. I can't even think of the dude's name. But he came.
This isn't Piers Morgan, is it?
No, not Piers Morgan. This is some other British dude. He might even be Australian.
It's possible.
And he talks about America, like, why are you guys, like, I'm glad we don't have to worry about this in my country. Here in America, you allow protesters to stop traffic, and like he's antagonizing people. You know, like, yeah, you're right. How dare us let, you know, how can Barack Obama be the spokesman for America? And how dare, like, he was the guy that kept talking about Obama wearing the tan suit. You know, so that's the other part of it. They're embarrassing people. You know, they're embarrassing young white guys. That one kid that we have in our school that graduated a couple of years ago, you and I was talking about the white kid that we was like, yo, where did this come from? You know?
Right.
And he said one time, he said, well, as a young white man, I shouldn't be embarrassed about what I have. I'm like, dude, you don't have to be embarrassed. He said, yeah, but you're trying to make me feel guilty about being white. I said, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm trying to bring to your knowledge and your awareness of what is going on.
I don't think you realize how much you couldn't care less what color he is. You're not even thinking that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm asking him, and he was deep into the Trump world.
Right. I know you're talking about too.
Deep. Right. And I was like, bruh, did you not sit in my class 4 years? Did you not sit next to people from different countries and different, you know, ethnicities and sexualities in our classroom? He was like, yeah, but now that I'm out of school, I can speak my mind. I'm like, so you repress your hate against us. He said, I didn't hate you. I just don't think y'all earned what y'all got.
And this is what we're up against. And that's, again, that's my fear, though, is that, I mean, part of it comes from, as you know, I'm into the Russian thing. Okay, I studied Russian. I speak with Russian people. Tomorrow morning, I'll be speaking with my Russian contacts. And they're in a country where they've never gotten out of that quagmire. They just, and they were saying how, you know, he's bad, and they know he's bad. The people I know, they know that Trump's bad. They're very liberal thinking in Russia, but they have to be quiet. They can only do this on Skype. They couldn't do this right now. They tell me, they said they have friends, and it'll sound similar. They have friends who hook, line, and sinker. They go with what Putin says. All the channels are for Putin. And he said that's what makes it so difficult for change in Russia, because not only does he control the military, the media, healthcare,
finance,
everything. Yeah, everything. They control everything. They control every governor of every oblast or region. They control everything. Where here, it's not quite like that. And so they've had 80 years of this kind of nonsense where it just continues. And then the added factor, you've got maybe 40%, 50% that really like him. And they dig this idea of Russia first, which is really not much different than white supremacy in the United States. It really isn't. And these people, because I have spoken with some of these people, they just remind me of Trumpers. It's just a different language. And then I see the good people, the ones that I will talk with tomorrow, but they're much more pessimistic about this because they don't feel they're ever going to get out of it. And there's good reason, because there is that control, which thankfully the Republicans don't have complete control. They almost had control January 6th. But luckily, there are people like that one guy that, he held the line and got him to the other door. That guy misses, and then the whole story changes. They don't even have that. So that's what makes me so worried, George, about the future, because, every year it's the same thing. Like, we got to be able to get out of this, and then all of a sudden there's Joe Manchin again, or there's Kirsten Sinema. And they're saying, no, well, we don't want to have DC is a 51st state. We know why they want DC. I mean, first of all, they should have representation, but yeah, we want to have 2 senators. Okay, and you've done your cheat, but you're not going to allow us to do it. And I'm not even saying it's a cheat because, like you say, there's more people in D.C. than there is probably in Wyoming. So what's the difference? But
it's 700,000 people in D.C.
Okay, so that's not a lot of people, but they still deserve representation, and they want one congressperson or something like that. I don't know, but I'm very, very pessimistic, and I'm going to keep fighting the fight as you have been. And anybody who doesn't know George is, and this sounds like I'm patronizing you, George, but George is, he was in the military, but he's a teacher, and he's out there. He's the real soldier. He lives it. He works with the community. He does a lot of things. I'm sure there's things I don't even know he does, but I just know him as a human being, and we need that kind of thing. But even so, I don't know what's going to happen because they're working on all these different things, especially these governors. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm frightened about what's going on in Florida. I mean, and Georgia. I mean, luckily they have 2 senators who are
North Carolina.
And North Carolina.
Bro, it's Arkansas, it's Alabama. I don't have to understand or agree with everybody. I'm a human being. I don't understand the whole. My daughter is constantly telling me about how transgender people pronouns and all this supposed to match this. So I'm learning that, but I accept it and I understand that person has the right to pursue happiness. They're changing laws not to even recognize those people. Not even like God forbid if somebody wanted to change their name from George to Georgiana, in some states, that's not going to happen. They're not going to allow that to happen. They're pushing laws to, it's like a whole nother species of people just being created. Like these people never been here before. I really know some people who like, where did all these transgender people come from? Like they've been here all the time. They just been, a minority. They've been quiet. At the same time, if we allow transgender people to be discriminated against, then we're going to wind up allowing handicapped people to be discriminated against. We're going to allow people of color, women to be discriminated against. I mean, the greatest benefit of all for equal rights, it's benefited women more than anything. It's benefited white women more than anything.
Right.
More than anything, But how many white women voted for Trump?
Yeah, it's still mind-boggling. I mean, again, it gets to the bottom line. I mean, I know that I've even shown the graphs, with white, black, every different type of category. But because I like to think of myself as a rationalist, I don't even like thinking the concept of color with these kind of conversations because it just seems so, binary, off and on, 1, 0. Like this is really bad what you're doing, and this is good. It's so simple, like wear your mask, that kind of thing. And if you can't even get to that level, then basically what you have is human beings who are no different than human beings 40,000 years ago. They just have a telephone in their hand and they think that they're intelligent, and it means to me that there are really few intelligent people, and that's what it comes down to, unless there is this power of propaganda that really, I mean, I'm still trying to figure it all out, how a large group of people, maybe it's just like evolution, or just the forces, there were so many racists out there that it just overcame anything that was good. I mean, that's the only thing I can really think that has happened, because don't forget, I think that the first real, as a party, the racists were the Southern Democrats, who switched, and then, because they're the real problem of the Republican Party now. It wasn't the Eisenhower Republican that was the problem. That was not.
It was the ones who left the Democratic Party,
right,
and became Republicans, and the Republicans became Democrats. It just it's a metamorphosis. You know, and it probably happen again. You never know. You know, it just depends on who opens the door, and I guess that's the compromise of 1868 coming back to bite us. You know, when you compromise,
and then you lost.
You know, if you give up more, if you have the moral high ground, you should never compromise.
Right.
And if you morally, you shouldn't give up. You can give up some finances, you can give up some land, but you can't give up the moral ruling. You know, if slavery is wrong, then that should be something that should be stood on. If Jim Crow is wrong, that's something to stand on. If you're in, and the crazy thing, Brian, just the crazy thing is, a lot of people who, and I hate, I myself don't like to use the word racist. I'd rather say someone who's prejudiced. Because we all have prejudices. You know, I'm a giant. Anything blue, I love. Anything
Absolutely,
green,
I know that. You don't like green.
And that's, I just know from some reason, I don't like the Eagles. I don't like the Phillies. I don't like the Flyers.
Right.
I can't even believe that the 76ers even still have an organization. So it's something about Philadelphia.
Right.
Period. I like the Steelers. So it's not Pennsylvania, it's Philadelphia. You know, and then I got stationed. Well, I moved down here and I'm surrounded, and I can't figure out for the life of me why all these New Jerseyans love these Philadelphia teams when the greatest teams in the world are up the turnpike.
It's that Philadelphia and New York thing. I remember going to a Phillies game, and there was some like drunks, and they were abusing these young New York Met fans, and like the guys were leaving.
Fans, you could do that to Met fans.
All right. But I remember they were leaving, and it was kind of cruel what they were doing. It all started with an argument who was better, the shortstop. It was like Rollins versus Reyes or whatever, and they started arguing, and then like they were screaming at them and saying New York sucks, stupid stuff like that. But you could see how it got out of hand, and then like the drunk guy makes a complete fool of himself, and then it'd be like everything was bad about New York, and you know. But in a way though, isn't that kind of why we're in the mess we're in? Right, it's tribalism, right? That's really what it is. And
I mean, you think about everything bad in America, it comes back to that's what I told you the other day, man. I literally, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was going through Netflix or something. I forgot what it was, and I saw Gangs in New York, and I hadn't seen it in a while. And before that movie, I wasn't a Leonardo DiCaprio fan. Like, I don't care what
I wasn't either. I mean,
and then I saw that movie, and I thought about the tribes, and they weren't calling.
And it was kind of like that back then. It wasn't exactly
they called themselves tribes. They came off the boat, and the Italians came off one gangway, the Irish came off another gangway, and you know and then the English walked off with somebody carrying their stuff. You know, they already had servants. So each tier of the ship had the lower you went in the ship was the lower you were as far as who you were as society was going to accept you.
Right.
So the people coming from England and Britain and the Dutch, they had servants carrying their bags, but then the Italians was one level down. And then they show like with Leonardo DiCaprio's guys, they were like literally all crammed in the lower bottom. They just came pouring out of the ship like rats, you know, just getting out of the ship, not signing in, trying to get in it. They literally skipped the line to sign in that they came from wherever they came from, and just went straight to the barrio where they were supposed to be at, in that little area where it was blacks, Irish, all in one place. And they were all treated the same. They were treated as invaders. They were treated as somebody's coming to take us. And it was just before the Civil War kicked off. And historically, New York had a really big problem with the native-born and the third-generation Americans hating on the new Americans. So what did the Irish and the Italians do? Instead of them ganging up with the people who are just as poor as them, they say, you know what? We have a tool that the black and the Spanish don't have. We could change our clothes and nobody
They
would
wouldn't
never
know.
know
Right.
that we were from another country. You know, our children are going to go to schools and no one will ever know. You know what I mean? Jewish people, Irish, and Italians changed their last name, dropped off the A after being because they wanted to be able to, they didn't want to be persecuted. The Catholics was persecuted. You couldn't be Catholic and live in the South.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't be Jewish and live in the South. You killed Christ.
Right.
You know, and that was the mentality that people had. I mean, man, I've been watching this one show, man. It was called Them. And it was showing how Westerners, people in Oregon were blaming black people for the Civil War. And they were persecuting them in Oregon and said, we don't want you here. Go back to California. We don't want no blacks here because you destroyed our country. And the one guy at first was like, it wasn't their fault. They didn't destroy the country. We destroyed the country because we weren't reading the Bible. And at some point during the series, as it was ending, the people who were reading the Bible were saying, hey, slavery's in the Bible. We should enslave them again. And so it was a tragic ending for the black people because they escaped Jim Crowism and went out west and got their land taken from them. You know, so I don't know. Let's say if we educated everybody and we opened up the history book and all the gaps, Brian, we filled it in. Good, bad, indifferent, no matter what. And date by date by date by date. This is American history. This is not white history. This is not black history. There's no Hispanic history. There's only American history.
It's just what is.
This is what happened.
Right.
And I remember telling a guy that the first person to die for the United States of America was a black man. He swore up and down that I was making it up. And this was before the internet. This was the 80s.
Right.
So I told him about Crispus Attucks. I said he was the first man to die. He died in the Boston Massacre. There's a small star on the ground in Boston where he died. That's it. There's no monuments built to him. There's no scholarships. There's no colleges named after him. There's no universities named after him. There's nothing named after this man of escaped slave. First man to die in America was a man of color. And there's no monuments. He has a star this big. You know the star like they have in the Walk of Halloween?
Hollywood.
Hollywood's Walk of Fame. Their stars are bigger than his. So this white guy, and I'm in Germany, and me and him going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he was like, nah, George, I never heard of this guy. And again, he's from West Virginia. He swore, I never heard of this. What are you talking about? Boston Massacre, they shot at people and then we threw the Boston Tea Party and all this. I said, dude, your history is so diluted. And he literally asked his mom to ask one of his teachers for a history book. And just before he left Germany, because he was a year older than me, he was about to leave Germany, he got a high school history book sent to him. And we were going through it. And I was like, yo, your history book don't even have George Washington, Benjamin Banneker in here.
Right.
He was like, who is Benjamin Banneker? I said, Benjamin Banneker helped build Washington, D.C. He said, no, it's Lafayette. You see it right here. Lafayette made the design. I said, Lafayette left America and went back to France and took his diagram with him. I said, Benjamin Banneker had a photographic memory and he laid out Washington, D.C. for the planners. He was like, how? I said, but there's no monuments to Benjamin Banneker in Washington, D.C.
All those things are lost. And I think that's really such a crime. And it's, in general, with history as it is, because I even said to my students, this is just my business students. I said, when you read something, my opinion is you have to understand what's behind the word rather than just read the word. I said, so when you hear about something like, monopolies, it's not just learning that, it's one company that controls a market. It's what they do. It's like an AT&T or Ma Bell that control the whole thing, or that put your prices up. And I think how much is left out in history, the real truth. You can't even put in a history high school textbook what actually happened. There's so much that's left out. In fact, if you look at a textbook at Bridgeton High compared to one in Russia concerning World War II, they would learn in Bridgeton that, obviously we were fighting with the Soviet Union, but there would be no mention about 80% of the battles against the German army were the Red Army and not the American army. And even though my relatives fought for the American army and the Navy,
we didn't get to fight against the Germans to the end.
And the same thing goes for World War I. But see, that's the whole point, is that you lose that in these books, because you have to wonder who's actually writing the book, and then the person reading it has to understand, like when they say, well, the bombs went off, until you actually experience a bomb or you understand what it's like to lose somebody, and we all will learn that at some point in time, that's why it means something. But it means something even more when you leave it out, because like you say, when you start leaving out these people in history, who was was it Dr. Drew who did the blood transfusions? Yeah. And then he himself, now I think it was something about...
He's in a car accident. Yeah. He's in a car accident in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And they took him to a hospital. They took him to the closest hospital. And they didn't accept blacks. Mm-hmm. So they had to send him all the way on the other side of Baltimore to go to the blacks, not the black hospital, but the hospital that was like the city hospital. And he bled to death. Mm-hmm. But he was the one that created blood plasma. And all he needed was a blood transfusion. And what he created, his death, you know how much more stuff he could have created? How to separate plasma from, blood, so blood transfusions could save people's lives in war. That was a wartime decision that he came up with that we still use to this day.
Right.
So think about all those white guys that live in Butte, Montana. And I use Butte, Montana because that's where my friend was from, who I was stationed with and who I went to basic training with. He's from Butte, Montana. He rode a horse to school since he was in the 7th grade. That's how he got back and forth to school. Drove a horse. He was a cowboy from Butte, Montana. He never, ever, ever spoke to a black man until the second day of basic training for the United States Air Force in 1986. He was 19 years old, and he had never spoke to a black man. The only thing he knew about me, and this is sad, this is crazy, is what he learned about me. We had we had our dorm, all of us was up one night, like 3 o'clock in the morning. We're about to leave basic training, and we finally can talk to one another about who we are. And half the white guys thought that all black people were like the ones they saw in Starsky and Hutch, Miami Heat, Miami Vice, and Beretta, Archie Bunker. Like whatever they saw on TV is what they thought was what black people were.
And to this day, I think a lot of people still think that.
Yeah. So, but think about it. Just think about it. If you'd have opened up your history book, now we know all history books in America are out of Texas.
Texas, right? And they have different books for different regions too. Like it's incredible what goes on.
Can you imagine if the brutality of the original sin of slavery was in there? If can you imagine if the true fact that Columbus actually landed in Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic, which wasn't even the Dominican Republic at the time? Can you imagine if all those Italians who remember the Italians last year were standing around the Christopher Columbus monument in Philadelphia?
God, I remember that.
Saying, this is our heritage. We can't have this. Wait. Your heritage, that's not your heritage. Me and my wife went to the Dominican Republic several years ago, and they were like, this is where Christopher Columbus came here, and that's why this is where he lived at when he came to the East, came to the West. He never landed in America.
Right.
He never landed in the United States.
Mainland,
he never
West,
landed.
right.
He never landed here. He never ever knew what American soil felt like under his feet. This is as far as he went. And he left and said that this land he landed on, we can make so much money here. And then the Portuguese followed and went to Brazil. And so, Brazil had slavery long before America, long before the colonies had slavery, 150 years before that. So we have to think about, Brian, if we want to change the perception of America to Americans, we must change the perception that Americans have of America.
Well, can I ask you this? And this gets into more of a modern realm. I think most people would agree that one of the great art forms, what art forms we do have, like jazz music or American film, is considered to be still above film, in the last 100 years above. Again, I say history, when you read a book, you don't feel as much. But do you think that perhaps we need to have more history taught in terms of film where people can at least get, or is that going too far? I don't know, but maybe you have to see a film.
You're 100% right. That just, again, most humans learn visually.
Mm-hmm.
It's stimulated. What stimulates I read Treasure Island several times before I actually saw the movie Treasure Island. I had a vivid imagination of what that island looked like, the island, that paradise. But until I actually saw what it confirmed what I imagined and created some falsehoods. I read the book about Tarzan, the novel, before I actually really stood it. And when I saw Tarzan on TV with Johnny Weissmuller, I thought, all the Africans were,
Tarzan kicked some ass, and he wasn't like.
Yeah, so I thought, and when he's swinging through the jungle,
right?
He's fighting against, the Africans there. They seemed like they were savages, right. And they were called savages. The same thing when Europeans came to America, they called it Native Americans savages. So when we look at savages, we look at them as somebody that's going to ravish us, take things from us. I think, and this is me coming from an educator's point of view.
Right.
I think the only way, and I keep saying this, and it's unfortunate I have to say this, but I don't believe in our lifetime, you and I both in our 50s, I don't believe in our lifetime that the change is going to happen. Now, the change is gradual. For 300 plus years of slavery and Jim Crowism, 400 years altogether, it takes time to make the change. But if you think about it, until we change the history books and we start teaching, we can't put it all in high school history books because it'll be encyclopedia. The Britannica encyclopedias that you used to have on my bookshelf would just be volumes of American history. If we just filled the books up and we taught everybody what everybody could, if we tell everybody that the Asians that came to America helped build a railroad system, and that helped trains get to the Pacific, and they brought their commodities to us. If we change it and show that there's really a lot of young white men that think that African Americans just want a handout. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So if we could find a way to just give everybody knowledge, like, yes, everybody has contribute to the success of America. And I know from my own point of view, just meeting people from different parts of America who view me differently just because they only know one thing about me. I'm a black guy.
Right.
I mean,
make assumptions.
This is crazy. This is crazy because this is 2020. People were walking around talking about, we won't be replaced instead of being embracing people.
Well, here's the thing, too, that I'm thinking of. You were mentioning, with the Irish and the Italians, and then you go back even slightly before that, because you had the slavery for so many years, these people who seem to think they're superior or have this just strange perspective on minorities, from an economic standpoint, when you had slavery and then, of course, wage slavery, that helps you. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. It helps you get from A to B really quickly when you get your labor for free. In this country, whether you are a racist or not, I mean, if you look at what happened, that's how this country moved so quickly, because it was on the backs of people giving free labor. And then even after that, it was just a paltry wage. And to some extent today, I mean, literally, I mean, who are the people cleaning up? It's the people that they're pointing the fingers at.
That's minimum wage get moved up.
Right.
It changes somebody's socio-economical background. I think about it when I was in high school back in the 80s, I made $3.11 an hour. And I felt good. But I couldn't raise a family on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about it, my father was making minimum wage. I was bringing home just as much money. I was an 18-year-old kid. No wonder my father was working 2 jobs, double shifts, come home, go to bed, get up, go to his next job. Because he had to have 2 jobs to take care of 3 of us.
And that's where I would also, I mean, first of all, I don't like legacy wealth, but I think one of the biggest gripes, I think, and I'm not African American, but I consider myself an intelligent person, that if I were African American, I'd be really, really upset with the fact that people don't understand legacy wealth, that people inherit the home, or even the conversation they have at dinner when you're a 5-year-old kid and your parents, have had great schooling and they know 7-syllable words. That's an advantage right in itself. And then when you get a $200,000 home that's left in your lap or something like that, that is such an advantage over somebody who, is born with a sock. And this is what infuriates me, because it's like when somebody who, well, you don't have to be African American to understand what happened to George Floyd. You say, that's the reality. That's how people have been treated, and these son of a bitches that do this crap have gotten away with it. And you should at least have some type of sensitivity toward empathy. Advantage, or empathy. Well, I don't even think they can go that far, but it's just, to me, I was very lucky to have wonderful parents. I mean, they made mistakes in certain ways, but one thing they didn't make, because they were simple, hardworking people, and they loved people, and they were just good people. But I knew from the beginning that things were unfair. I always knew. My dad kept drilling it into me. He's never become a bigot. He didn't have to tell me, but at a young age, I saw things. We would see how someone who was African American in my elementary school was treated. It wasn't quite the same. Or you'd hear things. Hold it, what word's that? I've never heard that word before.
But we don't have enough people to stand up, and then a lot of problems. A lot of times, people, they don't think like that, but they'll see it going on, and they won't say anything. Because, well, man, I need to mind my business, and again, the George Floyd situation, to me, is just one of many that have happened.
Right, and you, by the way, you missed it, but I did put on Tucker Carlson, one of his 4-minute spots where he said that everybody is basically colluding together and saying that we're not done yet, and as if somehow that was something that was pointing their fingers at Trump voters, saying that they're guilty of something. And I kept thinking, and I kept saying, this is really 2 + 2 here. I mean, it's quite obvious that we have a lot of work to do. I know we have a lot of work to do, because I see the difference between when I teach in one school district and not just that. Every day I come to school and the kid, he doesn't know how to spell anonymous or something. I know what's going on here. This is not something that simple. Well, the kid just has to study more. Yeah, we understand that, that the kid has to study more, but there's a lot of things going on from the birth of that child. And I'm not making excuses for people. I'm just saying this is the truth.
It's a reality.
It's a reality, right? That's the truth.
And until people have had the opportunity, like, I was probably the most conservative Democrat you've ever met in your life. Simply because I grew up poor, and I didn't know I was poor until I actually joined the military, and I realized, dang, I grew up poor. I didn't have what I was supposed to have. I didn't have the American dream. I was the first person in my family to own a home. I bought a home.
And that's a big thing too, because if you don't own something and you're constantly paying rent.
And just the sheer fact of being, when I first got to Germany, I always used my first base as my litmus test of how my career was going to go. I was the one black guy in a shop of 17. So I had two choices. Well, I had one big thing to do was just observe and listen. I listened to a lot of rock music. And my first time I ever listened to the whole Jimi Hendrix album was this white guy was like, "You don't know about Jimi Hendrix?" I was like, "Nah, I know about Hendrix that plays with the Temptations." So he put me on Hendrix, and he was like, "Black people discovered rock. They this rock music is yours. We took it." And we took it. I was like, okay. But I learned a lot about white guys that I didn't know, or that I had perceived that I thought I knew. Because growing up, I'm gonna be honest with you, I thought all white people were bad.
And I can understand that,
because from my grandfather telling me the reason why we live in New Jersey is that when he came home from when he came home from the Korean War in the 50s, that he went back to the Korean War because while he was living in Alabama after World War II, they were lynching black men like it was a sport. Like they were having picnics.
Right.
And that's where picnic come from. They pick a nigga and they gonna hang him from a tree. And literally, like, there's nothing the black people could do. They snatch somebody up, the Klan snatch somebody up, and that's the person who they're gonna accuse of doing something. And it's crazy. My grandfather's like, he had to go back into the military to get away from that. When he came back in the 50s, he literally was told, look, you can't walk downtown in your uniform. You need to take your uniform off. And most military guys, when they came home from the war, all they had was their military uniform.
Right.
Because what they wore to basic training was long gone. So literally, my grandfather got off the train, had to take his shirt off and walk to get home. And eventually, him and his brothers, my uncle Ira, and they had to sneak on a train and get out of Alabama, and hence New Jersey.
George, I don't know.
That's how I wind up. That's how my family wind up here. But the thing, a lot of Americans don't know that plight. They don't understand that a lot of the things that we feel as though I hate to say, we don't want reparations. We want recognition.
Yeah, because that comes first. You've got to be able to recognize the problem. I mean, at the base level,
But I'm telling you, Brian, until we get it in history books, and that's what Tucker Carlson keeps telling white people is they're trying to erase us.
Right.
They're not trying to erase. We're not trying to erase you. We're trying to be included. We want our children to be. We want our children to feel pride about this country. A lot of people can't understand why I serve in the military and why my two sons and my daughter serve in the military. A lot of them don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you have your children join the military to serve this country? I said, this is our country. I said, you don't understand the history behind what.
Yeah, they tell African Americans to go back, and the African Americans were the first one here. What do you think? Tell me to go back for? I was here before you when your parents came in 1920. What are you talking about?
Y'all just got the boat. We've been here since
right.
19. You just got here.
If you apply that logic, that means they have to go back because they,
then everybody got to go back.
Go back. Right.
So I think until we can educate people, and it does come down to education, a lack of education. Donald Trump said he loved the ignorant people.
Well,
he said, I loved it. I love the uneducated.
Right there.
And they cheered. And that's
the worst thing. because ignorant people are dangerous. It's like, having somebody play with fireworks. I mean, they are so dangerous. They're just ready to explode. And it's like when you have a kid on a trip, and like this one kid that's not doing the right thing, like you got to keep an eye on him because
that's
like
the one you got to. He's gonna be the last one to the bus,
right?
Or the one that got on the wrong bus.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that happen. The kid get on the wrong bus to go home. And like, dude, how'd you get on their bus? They don't even say Christian on the side of the bus.
Right.
I was looking at my phone and I started walking with the wrong crowd.
Yeah, well.
So I don't know, Brian. I mean, I just look at it like this. If we as Americans stayed at our social, there's more poor white people than there are poor black people, just numbers wise.
Numbers are right.
Just sheer numbers, because there's more white people that are actually poor. So if all the poor white people say, hey, it's time for me, why can't I have free education for my kids? Like, why would you vote for somebody that tells you that they don't want you to have the same amount they don't want to give you a raise? Why would you vote against yourself getting money?
Well, I hope I hope it is not. I hope there's not a mass psychosis. Maybe, I don't know if that's because we go back to Germany and you say, well, how did you? I'm really hoping that that's not the major cause of it. Maybe people, like you said, people in January 6th, they kind of went for that. How many people who weren't there again with the backpacks and then decided, well, I'll walk up and now I'm at the window. I'll just go in.
Donald Trump just said he's gonna meet us there.
Fight like hell. Yeah, of course he's gonna. Yeah, he's gonna meet you there.
We're going up there, and I'm gonna be with you.
Right.
I'm gonna be with you.
While I'm eating hors d'oeuvres, watching television as you go ahead and risk your life for me, and that's sick.
I mean, it's weird because that's what I would ask you as a white man. Why is it that white people vote against their own best interests?
Well, that's that is a question I've been trying to figure out, and that is and that one I should answer the fact that I'm white. Although I never think about that aside from the fact that I think in terms of like legacy wealth. Although I never had legacy wealth, but there still are legacy things like legacy education. But why do white people think the way they do? And I would only look at the people I know, the friends that I've had who were like that, and there were some, and I know people that think that way. There are twists of logic in what they'll say, like they'll pick out a couple things that might make economic sense or something like that, but then that doesn't mix with the reality of what the truth is.
It doesn't apply to them, though.
Right, like they can say, for example, you can say, well, this kid isn't studying, he's not. Yeah, well, that's true. It's like saying, like, that's the whole point. Like with George Floyd, like I don't care what you think about George Floyd. I think most African Americans knew that, like, he probably had some history of the counterfeit $20 bill, but that's not the issue here. They don't, it's not like if a black person dies from another black person being shot in the city, it's not like, they're, hey, that's a good thing. They're the ones that they're suffering the most. They know about that, but you don't put your knee on somebody's neck for, a $20 bill.
You think about, one man gets killed because he was selling counterfeit cigarettes. He was selling Lucy's. I grew up in Newark, and everybody sells Lucy's. You get a pack of cigarettes, and somebody asks you for a cigarette, you sell them a cigarette for $1. There's 20 cigarettes in a pack, you're going to make $15. Mm-hmm. People sell loose cigarettes. People sell CDs. We've had Sandra Bland die because she was stopped. We had Tamir Rice shot, and I'm just talking about people who had interaction with police. And anytime somebody bring up black on black crime, I said, we're not talking about black on black crime because we're not talking about white on white crime.
Right.
We're talking about police brutality.
Right.
These are people who are these people who are paid to protect and serve all the community. So you think about all these young men and women who are dying, and even some Hispanic, even some white, police are killing people at a look at all these other countries, man. It just boggles my mind because I've been in a situation where I've been arrested before, and I tell everybody there's no shame in my game. I tell people I got arrested, I committed a crime, I got arrested. But at the particular time I got arrested, they caught me. I was being beat by a mob of white people. And I got a gun pulled on me and handcuffs put on me. Now, I'm lost. I'm confused. How did this cop know that I committed a crime when I'm getting beat down?
Right.
And then he wanted to find out, why are you guys beating this guy up? So police were created to catch slaves and maintain and enforce slave and black laws. That's why they were created.
And they're not very educated in many cases. I mean, policemen for many, many years, I'm not trying to put them all down, but, most of them were just, I don't know what kind of graduates they were, but there wasn't much going on in terms of education. You could wear that uniform, you could make a good salary, but you didn't necessarily. I'm not saying everybody's like that now, but.
And traditionally, a lot of police are ex-military. Traditionally, a lot of police in a lot of states, a lot of cities, a lot of municipalities, there are people who came home from the military. They already know how to follow orders, and they're already geared up. So there's a lot of military people. I joined the military because I wanted to be a police officer. I was too young to be a police officer when I graduated high school. So I said, after 4 years of being in the military, I'll be old enough to be a police officer, and I'll get points toward my civil service exam. So I'll become a police officer. So many of my buddies who went in the Navy, Army, Marines, and Air Force got out after 4 years and joined the police department.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what their job was in the military, they became police officers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my mindset. And I know so many police that are former military. So they have this military idea. So you think about it. You just came home from Afghanistan. You just came home from Iraq. You just came home from Saudi Arabia or anywhere in a hot spot. You just came home, just got a military. You got PTSD already. You're already carrying some mental baggage. They give you a gun. They give you an AR-15, put in the trunk, or they give you a shotgun. They give you a bulletproof vest. You might as well wear a flight jacket.
Right.
You're wearing everything, and you're practicing every day shooting targets. You're ready for conflict.
The enemy.
Yeah, you're ready for, as the police say sometimes, you're ready for the natives. And so when you jump out of your squad car, you're ready to go. You're ready. Those guys are more amped up, ready to go than a police officer who had never served in the military before, who's just here to protect and serve. So there is a problem we have with the militarization of the police force.
I still can't. I'll be honest with you. I wonder every day, like simple stuff, like why can't the police go after the guy that's throwing the cigarette butts out the window, that's throwing trash out the window, and there's plenty of those people. I mean, live right around my neighborhood. Those kind of things they don't want to touch. Everything's like after the fact. But these other things they get involved with, there's so many people you could arrest who are just normal people that look a lot like me.
Giuliani time in New York, he called it quality of life arrest. Quality of life, that's what he was trying to promote. Like literally stop and frisk gave you the right that you could stop and frisk anybody that you suspected. Imagine you live near the lake and somebody who's walking through your neighborhood, they just happen, you know what, I'm gonna go fishing, but there's a spot you can fish that's back behind these homes that normally I go to with my boat, but now I'm gonna walk back there. And you just happen to see an individual walking in your community who you had never seen before. You call the police. The police have the right, presumably, to stop this person and say, where are you going? Why? I'm just walking. This is America. I can walk anywhere I want to walk. But stop and frisk said Mayor Giuliani gave those police department the right to stop and frisk anybody you want.
And he gave the Russian mob the right to take over the mob.
85%. 85% of the people who the police in New York and Newark also stop and frisk were people of minority descent.
Right. Well, that's
in certain communities. And like you said, he destroyed the Italian mob.
Right. But he brought in the Russian mob.
to take up all the empty spaces.
Which makes you still think. I mean, that's why I say I still believe there was collusion and not in my mind. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but it's a money laundering operation that's going on with the Russians and the Ukrainians. So, but listen, before we do go, George, because time is running short. A lot of people were asking about Dave, and Dave couldn't make it. Now he did send me something to you and to me. I just got this well, I just see this now, but he sent me something here. And he says here, I want you to click the link for tonight's show if you want to use it. I'm just going to click this. Dave usually has a surprise. He says he's got something really good or something. He told me on the phone that he's going to do something for us. So I just want to look at it real quick here. And what the hell? Video. Oh, my God. Dave, if you watch this later, you made this a private video, which means we can't watch it. So that's the video from Dave. Video unavailable. This video is private. Good going, Dave. That's Dave, all right. All right. Anyway, but yeah.
In the chat, I saw that a lot of people was talking about the two gentlemen, the one who wrote Tarzan and one who wrote The Wizard.
Right.
of Oz.
Let me go back to that if I can. They did mention the name.
Wizard of Oz was crazy, man.
Well, he
wanted to exterminate all indigenous people.
Where is that?
Hey, it's a show you need to check out, Brian, called Exterminate All Brutes.
Here he is, Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, advocated exterminating the native population. Wow. Yep. That's pretty sick, you know. And then you find out, like, the very people that you looked up to in terms of, like, what they produced, like, wanted to put a knife in your bag.
John Wayne felt the same way.
John Wayne was horrible. He was horrible. He's another draft dodger, too, so I'm pretty sick of him.
And then somebody talked about Elvis. Elvis was dating teenagers when he came home.
Yeah, well, that I wouldn't doubt. I don't know what he was doing. But, yeah, that's... a lot of people will let you down. I know my father had always had a real beef against Thomas Edison because he was a racist and a bigot. Henry Ford was not a great guy. The guy that owned Hunt's ketchup initially.
Not Lombardi. Lindbergh.
Oh yeah, he's a real winner too, huh?
Worse.
Yeah, I mean these people that we put up on the pedestal. I mean they're just. That's why I say you have to. And it's a shame Dave, in a serious sense now, it's a shame Dave's not here because Dave's very good at looking at the history of this country and the realities of what it really was, and we're just not on. You know, like you said, history's not showing what really was, and it's only a report. And as you say, you're getting it from Southwestern, the company or whatever company is in Texas, and then they have a different science chapter in New Jersey that they do in Texas because the lawmakers there, you know, believe in intelligent design and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, there's no mention of dinosaurs or cavemen or the Neanderthals.
Right, yeah, they don't want to touch on that kind of thing. Like
that's crazy that you could just eliminate a whole.
That fossil means nothing, you know.
Yeah, they're not even real. Don't go to museums.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. These people don't believe it. Why even? Why take the vaccine? Why even live? Why don't you just go on to the next place right now? You know, I don't get that. You know, it's just too crazy. You know, I mean, stupid people are like, again, I think it comes down to it tonight, George. Stupid people cause big problems. They cause really big problems, and you know, you and I are on the other half of the life. Hope, touch wood, we live long, but. You know, it's very depressing though. You know, to think back. I mean, you mentioned the '70s, and I go back to the '60s, and while there were things that I enjoyed, as the opposite of what Tucker Carlson said, we need a lot of work done. We are not there at all, and it's very depressing. I hate even dying before this. It's like what Martin Luther King said. He's basically saying like you're probably not going to see this thing, but we're going to get there, and it's our duty to. I mean, I think that's what he was saying. I mean, basically,
yeah, it's our duty to pave the direction.
You got to pay some price
to make the changes, the sacrifices for others.
Right.
My grandfather, he served in the military, and I asked him why. He said, and he pointed me in my chest. He said, "Because of you." I was like, "Well, Granddad, I wasn't alive when you were fought in World War II." or Korean War. He was like, but I believe that I can make what my sacrifice for America would make America sacrifice for you.
Right, and that's why we should respect people, even if you don't know them. Like I didn't know your grandfather, but what your grandfather was is what everybody. You don't have to shed a tear because you don't know the person, but you should respect what they did, because all you had to do is think for, if you could imagine for 5 minutes what your grandfather went through, and there'd be nobody that would even want to think for 5 minutes about it. You know what I mean?
I've had both my grandfathers, maternal and
all right.
paternal.
Well, that's both a perfect point. Like that's why we should respect, because if you put yourself in the shoes, that person's another you. They're just a different name and a different time, but they paid the price, and that's why I say there's meaning behind the words. There's the real history of being behind the lines, or having a bullet whistle. I mean, it because you've served. It's just mind-boggling how people cannot respect people they don't know. I mean, you have to. They were, and that's it's a real. I try to push that with my students, because it does. You don't have to cry for somebody. You don't know them. You haven't had that personal attachment. But if you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes for once, you might figure out that we're all kind of the same, and just we're trying to. We're all in a bad position here, and some a lot worse than others. And respect what people went through. Whether it was the first guy who died in the Civil War or revolution, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's what matters is what they went through, and that's not a word. That's a real thing. And if you think that you've won anything, not you, George, but if you think you win anything because you didn't go through it, you haven't done anything for this planet. You really haven't. You haven't done it.
Because we've got a long way to go, brother. And,
no, we have a lot more than what Tucker Carlson would make you believe. It's very insensitive. I'm kind of glad I started with that. It was good. George, listen, we're running short time. I thank you so much for coming on. It's always great to have your perspective, because you come back from history.
I've been real busy lately, so I haven't been able to catch up.
No, you'll come on again, and it was an interesting night because I'm usually listening to Dave, and you'd be listening to him too right now. So
Dave's the man.
Dave's the man. But Dave's a great guy, and I mean, I'm casting no aspersions. I'm just joking about Dave, but he did screw up with that video there. You can clearly see. Dave, if you're watching this later or you're watching it now, you got to click public. Okay, you can't click private. That means only you and Stormy can watch it. Okay, or maybe that was it. Who knows? All right, George. Have a wonderful evening, and tell Lanita I said hello too. Tell Lanita I said hello.
She can hear you.
Oh, Lanita. Hi. Great to hear from you, Lanita. So, okay. All right, I'll see you on Monday then, okay?
All right, brother. Be safe, everybody.
It's great to see you. Absolutely.
Keep God first and wear your mask.
I'll see you, George. Thank you.